I stood in the kitchen, my hands covered in flour as I kneaded the dough. The scent of fresh herbs filled the room, and the soft glow of candlelight flickered against the walls. It was our anniversary, 15 years together, and I wanted it to be perfect. I had spent hours preparing everything, her favorite meal, a bottle of wine we had saved from our honeymoon in Napa, and even a playlist of songs that meant something to us over the years. I'd been busy lately, we both had, but I thought maybe, just maybe, this night could bring us closer again. I wanted to show her that I hadn't forgotten. I wanted to reignite something that felt lost. But as I checked my phone for the 5th time in an hour, the sinking feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. There was no message from her. No running late, or can't wait to see you. Just silence. She'd left early that morning for a work trip, something about a meeting with a client in another city. I had believed her. I wanted to believe her. But the distance between us had been growing for months, and my mind kept wandering to darker places. Was there someone else? Was I just being paranoid? I didn't want to think like that, but the signs had been there for a while. The late nights, the sudden trips, the way she avoided looking me in the eyes when we talked. I wiped my hands on a towel and stared at my phone again. Still nothing. I couldn't shake the image of her with someone else. It gnawed at me. I tried to ignore it for so long, tried to be the good husband, the understanding one. But tonight, something felt different. Something felt wrong. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat down at the table, trying to calm my racing thoughts. Maybe she was just caught up at work. Maybe she'd walk through the door any minute with an apology and a smile, and all my doubts would disappear. I took a sip, letting the rich flavor roll over my tongue, but it did nothing to settle the unease in my chest. That's when I made the call. I had hired a private investigator weeks ago, after another one of her sudden weekend trips. I hadn't told anyone, not even my closest friends. I was ashamed, honestly. Ashamed that I didn't trust my wife, ashamed that I felt the need to go behind her back to find the truth. But I couldn't live in the dark anymore. I needed to know. "Yeah, it's me," I said when the investigator picked up. "Did you find anything?" There was a pause on the other end, and my heart raced in the silence. I heard the investigator clear his throat before he spoke again. "I was just about to call you," he said. I followed her to the hotel. I gripped the edge of the table, the blood draining from my face. I had suspected it, but hearing it out loud was like a punch to the gut. "She's not alone," he continued. "I'm sorry, man. There's someone with her. A guy." I felt like the room was closing in on me, the air growing thick and suffocating. My head buzzed with the weight of his words. I had known, deep down, but hearing it confirmed was a different kind of pain. I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my voice steady. "Did you get any photos?" It was a cold question, but I needed proof. If I was going to confront her, I couldn't go in empty-handed. I needed to see it for myself. I did. "I'll send them over," he said, his voice softening, like he could sense the storm brewing inside me. "Look, I know this isn't easy. If you need anything, just call." The phone buzzed in my hand as the photos came through. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring as I scrolled through them. There she was, laughing with him, touching his arm, looking at him the way she used to look at me. My stomach churned, and I fought the urge to throw my phone across the room. I stood up, pacing back and forth, the floor creaking under my weight. How long had this been going on? How many times had she lied to my face? And why? Why did I feel like the fool for not seeing it sooner? The anger bubbled up inside me, threatening to explode. I wanted to scream, to punch something, to drive to that hotel and drag her out of there. But instead, I took a deep breath and let the fury simmer beneath the surface. I wasn't going to let her see how much this hurt me. Not yet. I had my own cards to play. I poured another glass of wine and sat back down, staring at the empty chair across from me. The night was ruined, the romance I had planned was a joke, but I wasn't going to be the only one suffering. I pulled up my messages and scrolled through until I found her sister's number. Alyssa. She had been texting me all week, asking how things were going, if I needed anything. We had gotten close over the years, maybe a little too close, but I never acted on it. Not until now. I sent her a quick message, "You free tonight?" Her reply came almost instantly, "Of course. What's up?" I smiled to myself, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction wash over me. If my wife thought she could lie to me, deceive me, and walk away without consequences, she was dead wrong. When Alyssa arrived an hour later, I didn't hesitate. I didn't think about the past, the future, or the mess this would create. I only thought about the revenge, the twisted justice of it all. We ended up in the bedroom, her laughter filling the silence, the scent of her perfume mingling with the candlelight I had set up for my wife. And when it was over, I took a picture. The look on Alyssa's face when I asked her to pose was one of confusion, but she did it anyway, too caught up in the moment to question me. I snapped the photo and sent it to my wife, attaching a message that would rip her world apart the way she had torn mine. "Guess who's at home, celebrating our anniversary?" I hit send, my heart pounding, adrenaline surging through my veins. It didn't feel good, not exactly. But it felt like control, like taking back the power she had stolen from me. As I lay there in the dark, Alyssa asleep beside me, I waited for the fallout. I knew it would come. And when it did, I'd be ready. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow over the room. I sat on the edge of the bed, my mind racing. Alyssa was still asleep, her body curled under the sheets, oblivious to the storm that was about to hit. My phone sat heavy in my hand, the screen dark. I hadn't heard from her, my wife. Not yet. I half expected her to burst through the door any minute, screaming, demanding answers, but instead, there was nothing. Just silence. Part of me wondered if she had seen the message at all, but that was impossible. I knew she would have checked her phone the moment she woke up. She always did. My fingers hovered over the screen, tempted to call, but I resisted. I wanted her to come to me, to be the one to make the first move. Let her stew in her guilt, her shame. Let her feel what it's like to be on the receiving end of betrayal. Alyssa stirred beside me, her hand reaching out to touch my back. "You're up early," she mumbled, her voice still thick with sleep. "Yeah," I said, my voice distant, distracted. I couldn't focus on her right now. My mind was elsewhere, tangled in the mess I had created. She sat up, the sheets falling away from her body, and looked at me with a sleepy smile. "Last night was unexpected," she said softly, her fingers brushing against my arm. "But I'm not complaining." I forced a smile, nodding. "Yeah, unexpected." The truth was, last night wasn't about her. It wasn't about us. It was about revenge, plain and simple. But now that the dust had settled, I wasn't sure if I felt any better. The satisfaction I'd hoped for hadn't come. All that remained was a hollow ache in my chest, a nagging voice in my head asking, "What now?" Alyssa leaned closer, her lips brushing against my neck. "You okay?" I pulled away slightly, standing up from the bed. "Yeah, I'm fine. I need to get some air." She frowned, confusion flickering across her face, but she didn't press. "All right. I'll be here if you need me." I grabbed my phone and slipped out of the bedroom, closing the door behind me. The house was quiet, eerily so. It felt wrong somehow, like the calm before a storm. I walked to the kitchen, pouring myself a cup of coffee, but the moment the steaming liquid hit my lips, I felt sick. I set the cup down, staring blankly at the floor. What was I thinking? Sleeping with her sister? Sending that photo? Was I any better than her now? I heard the faint buzz of my phone on the counter, and my heart leapt into my throat. Finally. I picked it up, my hands trembling, and saw her name flashing on the screen, Madison. The wife who betrayed me. I hesitated for a second, then swiped to open the message. We need to talk. Now. I exhaled slowly, the tension in my chest easing just slightly. At least she wasn't pretending anymore. She wasn't hiding behind lies. She wanted to face this, and honestly, so did I. I shot a quick text back, I'll be here. Come whenever you're ready. I didn't have to wait long. Not more than an hour later, I heard the front door creak open. Alyssa had left by then, with nothing more than a kiss on the cheek and a promise to catch up later. I didn't have the heart to tell her this wasn't going to be the start of something new. It was nothing more than a moment of vengeance, one that had left a sour taste in my mouth. Madison walked into the living room, her face pale, her eyes wide with a mix of shock, fury, and hurt. She held her phone in her hand like a weapon, gripping it tightly as if it was the only thing keeping her upright. You, her voice cracked, barely a whisper. You slept with my sister. I didn't flinch, didn't look away. I did. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't break. Why? I crossed my arms over my chest, leaning against the counter. Why do you think? She shook her head, her lips trembling. This is how you get back at me. By screwing my sister. How could you? I raised an eyebrow. You really want to ask me that? How could I? After everything you've been doing behind my back. She swallowed hard, her knuckles turning white as she tightened her grip on the phone. I didn't mean for this to happen. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. You didn't mean for it to happen. What, you just tripped and fell into another man's bed? Is that it? Madison's face twisted in pain, and she took a shaky step toward me. It's not like that. Then what is it like, Madison? I snapped, my voice rising. Because from where I'm standing, it looks pretty damn clear. You've been lying to me for months, sneaking around, meeting him in hotels. Don't try to tell me this wasn't a choice. She blinked, her eyes brimming with tears. I didn't want to hurt you. My chest tightened, the anger bubbling up inside me. Well, congratulations. You succeeded. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence, the weight of our words hanging in the air. Madison wiped her eyes, her hands trembling. She looked at me like she didn't recognize the man standing in front of her. Maybe she didn't. Maybe I didn't recognize myself either. What happens now? She whispered, her voice barely audible. I stared at her, the woman I had loved for years, the woman I had trusted with everything, and felt nothing but the dull ache of betrayal. That's up to you, I said coldly. But this marriage? It's over. Madison took a deep breath, her body shaking. You're serious? I've never been more serious about anything in my life, I replied, my voice steady. You made your choice. I made mine. She nodded slowly, as if the reality of it all was finally sinking in. Her shoulders slumped, and she let out a small, broken laugh. I guess I deserve this. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. She knew the truth as well as I did. As she turned to leave, I felt a pang of something deep inside me, regret, maybe. But it was too late for that now. Too much had been broken between us. Too many lies, too much deceit. Madison paused at the door, her hand on the handle. She looked back at me, her eyes pleading. Is this really it? I nodded. It's over, Madison. Without another word, she walked out the door, and the sound of it closing behind her echoed through the empty house. I stood there for a long time, listening to the silence, wondering how everything had fallen apart so quickly. I should have felt victorious, but all I felt was emptiness. The days after Madison left blurred into one long, empty stretch of silence. I'd wake up, go through the motions, shower, eat, maybe head to work if I felt like it, but nothing seemed real anymore. The house felt like a tomb, filled with the ghosts of what used to be. Every corner reminded me of the life we'd shared, the plans we'd made, all now shattered. I thought the anger would go away after I kicked her out, after I sent that picture and watched her world come crumbling down. But the anger didn't go away. If anything, it had only sharpened, hardened into something darker. I couldn't just let it end there. I needed to know more. Needed to understand how deep her lies ran. That's when I decided to dig deeper, to see if the betrayal went beyond what I already knew. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for the private investigator. The last time we spoke, he had confirmed her affair, and I thought that was enough. Now, I wasn't so sure. I needed to know everything. "Hey, it's me again," I said when he answered. "I need you to keep digging." There was a pause on the other end, the investigator clearly hesitating. "Are you sure you want to go down that road? You already know what's going on." "I'm sure," I replied, my voice firm. "I need to know if there's more. How long it's been going on. If there's anyone else. Everything." He sighed, but he didn't argue. "All right. I'll look into it. Give me a few days." I hung up, my stomach churning with a mix of anticipation and dread. Part of me hoped he wouldn't find anything new, that the affair with her lover was the extent of her betrayal. But another part of me, the part that was still seething with anger, almost wanted there to be more. I wanted to justify my rage, to know that I hadn't overreacted. The days crawled by as I waited for his call. In the meantime, I busied myself with the mundane, going to work, running errands, pretending that everything was fine. But at night, when the world grew quiet, the questions would creep back in. How long had she been lying to me? What had I missed? And most importantly, why? When the call finally came, it wasn't the relief I'd been hoping for. "You were right to dig deeper," the investigator said, his voice heavy. "It's worse than we thought." I sat down, my heart pounding in my chest. "What do you mean?" "She's been seeing him for over a year. But it's not just him. There were others before. I found texts, emails, even some payments. It looks like she's been hiding a lot from you." I felt like the floor had fallen out from under me. A year? And others before him? My mind raced, trying to piece together the timeline. All the times she'd looked me in the eye, all the nights we spent together, had any of it been real? "There's more," the investigator continued, and his tone told me it wasn't good news. "She's been funneling money out of your joint accounts. Not a lot at once, but over time, it adds up. I'm guessing it's to fund her trips, pay for hotels, that sort of thing." My hands clenched into fists, white-hot rage boiling inside me. She hadn't just lied, she'd stolen from me. She'd taken our life, our future, and used it to fund her affair. "Send me everything," I said through gritted teeth. "I want it all." The investigator agreed, and within the hour, my inbox was flooded with files, screenshots of messages, receipts, bank transfers, and photos. As I scrolled through them, the full extent of her betrayal became clearer, and with it, the overwhelming weight of how blind I had been. She had covered her tracks well, but not well enough. I saw the conversations between her and her lover, the flirtation, the promises to meet in secret. But the part that hit hardest was how casual it all seemed. Like I didn't even exist. Like our life together was just a sideshow while she lived her real life somewhere else. I was so consumed by the anger, by the raw pain of it all, that I didn't hear the knock at the door at first. When it came again, louder this time, I stood up and walked over, my mind still racing. I opened it to find Madison standing there, her eyes red and puffy, like she'd been crying for days. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice cold. She swallowed hard, looking down at her hands. Can I come in? Please. We need to talk. I stepped aside, letting her in, but I didn't offer her a seat. She stood awkwardly in the middle of the living room, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold herself together. I'm sorry, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Sorry. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. You think an apology is going to fix this? She looked up at me, tears brimming in her eyes. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you. Didn't want to hurt me. I took a step toward her, my fists clenched at my sides. You've been lying to me for over a year, Madison. A year. And that's just with this guy. Who knows how long it's really been going on? She flinched, her lip trembling. I know I messed up. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I still love you. Love? I spat the word out like it was poison. You don't know what love is. If you did, you wouldn't have done this. You wouldn't have thrown away everything we had. Madison wiped her eyes, her whole body shaking. I'm scared, all right? I'm scared of what's going to happen now. I don't know where to go, what to do. Please, can't we just talk about this? Figure it out together. I stared at her, the woman I once thought I'd spend my life with, and all I felt was disgust. Figure it out together. There is no together anymore, Madison. You killed that. She took a shaky step toward me, reaching out like she was going to touch me, but I stepped back. Don't, I warned. Don't touch me. Don't come near me. Her hand dropped to her side, her face crumpling in pain. Please. I'll do anything. Just tell me what you want. I wanted to scream at her, to throw her out, to hurt her the way she had hurt me. But as I looked into her eyes, all I saw was the broken shell of the woman I used to love. She wasn't worth my rage anymore. She wasn't worth any more of my energy. I want you to leave, I said quietly. And I never want to see you again. Madison's breath hitched, her eyes widening in shock. You don't mean that. I do, I replied, my voice firm. You've already taken everything from me. I'm not letting you take any more. For a moment, she just stood there, staring at me like she didn't know what to do. Then, with a sob, she turned and rushed out the door, slamming it behind her. I stood there for a long time, the silence settling around me like a heavy weight. I had wanted this. I had wanted her out of my life. But now that she was gone, I wasn't sure if the emptiness left behind was any better than the pain. The days after Madison left were a blur, but not in the way I had imagined. I thought that once she was gone, things would start to get better, that I'd feel a sense of relief, a clean break. Instead, it felt like my world was spiraling even further out of control. The anger I had been holding onto so tightly now had nowhere to go, and it festered, turning into something darker, something I couldn't shake. I tried to keep myself busy, but it wasn't long before everyone around me started noticing something was wrong. Friends, co-workers, even my boss, they could all sense it. I wasn't the same. I was losing focus, snapping at people for no reason, barely able to hold a conversation without my mind drifting back to the betrayal. The lies, the money she stole, the affair. It played on a loop in my head, over and over again. One night, after a particularly long day at work, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, a half-empty bottle of whiskey in front of me. I hadn't meant to drink that much, but once I started, I couldn't stop. The alcohol numbed the edges of my anger, dulled the pain for a while, but it didn't fix anything. It never did. That's when my phone buzzed. I stared at it for a moment, my vision swimming, before reaching out to grab it. I wasn't expecting anyone to call. No one really checked in on me anymore, not after the mess I had made. But when I saw the name on the screen, my heart skipped a beat. It was Madison. I hesitated for a second before swiping to answer. What do you want? My voice came out harsher than I intended, but I didn't care. I didn't owe her kindness anymore. There was a pause on the other end, and for a moment, I thought maybe she had hung up. But then I heard her voice, quiet and shaky. I need to talk to you. I leaned back in my chair, letting out a bitter laugh. We've already talked, Madison. There's nothing left to say. Please, she whispered, and there was something in her voice that caught me off guard. Desperation. Fear. I know you don't want to hear this, but I'm in trouble. I frowned, setting the bottle down on the table. What kind of trouble? There was another long pause, and when she spoke again, her voice was barely audible. I got into an accident. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My mind raced, 1,000 questions flooding in at once. Are you okay? I'm not hurt, she said quickly, her voice trembling. But the car, it's totaled. I don't know what to do. I don't have insurance, at least not anymore. I'm screwed. I rubbed a hand over my face, trying to process what she was telling me. This wasn't my problem. Not anymore. She had made her choices, and this was just another consequence of those choices. But despite everything, despite the anger and the betrayal, there was still a part of me that couldn't just walk away from her in a moment of crisis. Where are you? I asked, my voice low. She hesitated, then rattled off an address, a place a few towns over, far from where she had been living with me. I hung up the phone without another word, grabbed my keys, and headed for the door. The drive was long and silent, the whiskey still swirling in my veins as I navigated the dark roads. I wasn't sure what I was doing. Maybe I was just curious. Maybe part of me wanted to see her broken and vulnerable, to know that she was suffering just as much as I was. When I pulled up to the address she had given me, I saw her standing by the side of the road, the wreckage of her car behind her. The front end was smashed in, the hood crumpled like a piece of paper. Madison stood there, arms wrapped around herself, shivering in the cool night air. I got out of the car and walked over to her, my footsteps echoing in the stillness. What the hell happened? She looked up at me, her eyes wide and filled with tears. I don't know. I was upset. Distracted. I wasn't paying attention. I shook my head, a mixture of frustration and pity welling up inside me. And now you expect me to bail you out? She bit her lip, looking down at the ground. I don't know who else to turn to. For a long moment, I just stood there, staring at her. This woman who had once been everything to me, who had lied and cheated and stolen from me, now stood before me, broken and lost. I didn't know whether to hate her or feel sorry for her. Get in the car, I said finally, my voice tired. She hesitated, then nodded, walking over and climbing into the passenger seat. I followed her, sliding behind the wheel, and we drove in silence for a while. The tension between us was thick, but neither of us knew what to say. The whiskey was starting to wear off, leaving me with a pounding headache and a sense of regret for even coming out here in the first place. Why did you call me? I asked after a long stretch of quiet. Madison sighed, her fingers fidgeting in her lap. Because I didn't know what else to do. I've screwed up, okay? I know that. I've lost everything, and now I've got nothing. I clenched my jaw, staring straight ahead at the road. That's not my problem anymore. I know, she whispered. But I thought maybe you'd still care. Even just a little. I didn't respond. I didn't know how to. Did I care? Maybe. But it wasn't the kind of care that would fix anything. It wasn't the kind of care that could bring us back to where we were before everything fell apart. We pulled up to the house, and she sat there for a moment, staring at the front door. I'll leave in the morning, she said quietly. I don't have anywhere else to go tonight. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. She got out of the car and walked up the steps, her shoulders slumped in defeat. I followed behind her, feeling a strange mix of anger and sadness as I watched her disappear into the house. Inside, the silence was deafening. She disappeared into the guest room, and I stood in the hallway, feeling more alone than ever. I had thought this would bring me closure, that seeing her like this would make everything easier. But it didn't. All it did was remind me of what we had lost, what I had lost. I poured myself another drink and sat down on the couch, staring at the empty space where Madison used to sit beside me. The memories flooded back, uninvited. The nights we spent talking, laughing, dreaming about the future. All of it felt so far away now, like a different life. A life that had died the moment she chose someone else. I downed the drink, hoping it would dull the ache in my chest, but it didn't. Nothing could. The morning came with an unsettling stillness. I woke up to the faint glow of sunlight filtering through the blinds, my head pounding from the remnants of the previous night's drinking. The guest room door was ajar, and when I reached out to check, the bed was empty. Madison was gone. I stood there for a moment, the weight of her absence sinking in. The house felt eerily quiet, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I wasn't sure how I felt about it. Part of me was relieved that I didn't have to face her again, that I didn't have to go through another round of emotional warfare. But there was something else too, something I couldn't quite name. A hollowness, maybe. I walked through the house, the rooms echoing with the silence she'd left behind. No note, no message. Just, nothing. I didn't know where she'd gone, but I knew she wouldn't be coming back. And maybe that was for the best. Too much had happened. Too many things were said that couldn't be unsaid. Too many lies exposed that couldn't be ignored. As I stood in the kitchen, pouring myself a glass of water, I thought about the past few months, how quickly everything had unraveled. How the life we'd built together had turned to dust in my hands. I thought about Madison's tear-streaked face last night, her trembling voice, the way she had looked at me with eyes full of regret. But even as the memory lingered, it felt distant, like a bad dream that was already starting to fade. I had spent so much time being angry, consumed by thoughts of revenge and betrayal, but now that she was gone, I felt nothing. Just an emptiness that settled deep in my chest, a void that I wasn't sure how to fill. I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the spot where she had once sat, laughing, talking, planning our future. Those days felt like another lifetime now, a life that no longer belonged to me. And yet, despite everything, I couldn't help but wonder, was there a way to come back from all this? Was there a way to move forward, or had we both been too broken for too long? The thought barely had time to settle before my phone rang, pulling me from my spiraling thoughts. I glanced at the screen, expecting it to be a work call or maybe one of the guys checking in on me, but the number wasn't familiar. I hesitated for a second before answering. Hello? Is this Mr. Carter? The voice on the other end asked, sounding formal and unfamiliar. Yeah, who's this? I replied, a knot forming in my stomach. This is Officer Daniels from the State Police. I'm calling regarding your wife, Madison Carter. The mention of her name made my heart stop for a moment. What's this about? Did something happen? There was a brief pause on the other end, and then the officer spoke again, his tone careful and measured. I'm sorry to inform you, but your wife was involved in a serious car accident early this morning. She was found near the interstate, and it appears she lost control of the vehicle. She's currently in critical condition at St. Mary's Hospital. I couldn't breathe. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, knocking the air from my lungs. Is she going to be okay? She's in a coma, the officer said gently. The doctors are doing everything they can, but it's too soon to say what the outcome will be. I stood there, frozen, the world around me blurring. A coma. The word echoed in my head, but I couldn't make sense of it. Just last night, she had been here, broken, yes, but alive. And now, this? What caused the accident? I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. We're still investigating, the officer replied. It appears she may have been speeding, possibly distracted. We're not ruling anything out, but right now, our focus is on her condition. Speeding. Distracted. The pieces started falling into place. She had been upset when she left, and I couldn't help but wonder, had our fight been the reason? Had the weight of everything we'd been through pushed her to that breaking point? I'll head to the hospital, I muttered, not even sure what else to say. I'm very sorry, Mr. Carter, the officer said before ending the call. I stood there for a long moment, my phone still in my hand, my mind reeling. 1,000 thoughts raced through my head, but none of them made sense. How had it come to this? How had everything spiraled so far out of control? Was this my fault? Was this her punishment? Or was it just karma? I couldn't shake the feeling that this was the universe's way of evening the scales. Madison had hurt me, lied to me, betrayed me in ways I never thought possible. But now, lying in a hospital bed, she was paying a price that felt far too steep. The drive to the hospital was a blur, my mind running in circles the whole way. When I arrived, the sterile smell of disinfectant hit me, and the cold white walls seemed to close in as I made my way to the ICU. A nurse directed me to Madison's room, and when I stepped inside, the sight of her took my breath away. She looked so small, so fragile, lying there surrounded by machines, her face pale and still. Tubes ran from her arms, and the steady beep of the heart monitor was the only sign that she was still alive. I stood at the foot of her bed, unable to move, unable to process the weight of it all. This woman, my wife, the one who had lied to me, cheated on me, taken everything we had and thrown it away, was now lying here, fighting for her life. And I couldn't help but wonder, was this justice? Was this the universe's way of making her pay for what she had done? Or was it something else, something darker, something that went beyond anything I could understand? I didn't have the answers. All I had were questions, questions that gnawed at me, keeping me awake, haunting me as I stood there in the sterile hospital room, watching the woman I had once loved lie motionless in front of me. The nurse came in at some point, checking the machines, adjusting the IVs. She glanced at me, her face soft with sympathy, but she didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. I sat down in the chair beside the bed, my eyes fixed on Madison's face, waiting for some sign of life, some flicker of movement. But there was nothing. Just the steady beep of the heart monitor and the cold, empty silence of the room. And in that silence, one thought kept repeating itself over and over in my mind. Was this karma? Was this what she deserved? I didn't know. But as the hours ticked by and the sun began to set outside, casting long shadows across the room, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was somehow responsible. That our choices, her betrayal, my revenge, had led us both here, to this moment, to this place of irreversible damage. And now, all I could do was wait. Wait and wonder if she would ever wake up. Wonder if I would ever have the chance to ask her why. Wonder if I would ever be able to forgive her, or myself. But as the night wore on and the darkness deepened, one thing became clear, this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about me too. About the choices we had both made. And the price we were both paying.